Hi everyone, welcome to the 3 o'clock talk in Los Angeles B. First, a word from our sponsors, MaxCDN. MaxCDN is a next-generation content delivery network based in Los Angeles. The whole team is obsessed with speed, automation, real-time reports, and implementation. So if you want to put some bandwidth through their CDN, go ahead and head over to maxcdn.com for a free trial. Our talk now is from speaker Elijah Caine, and it's an introduction to Blender3D.
Hey, how's it going? Hi. So, you guys can hear me through the mic thing, right? Cool. Okay. So, hi, my name is Elijah. I'm going to be giving a talk on Blender. So, what's my next slide? So, basically what we're going to try to cover is what Blender is and basically how to use it. The biggest problem that a lot of people have when they touch Blender, they hear about what it is. It's a 3D modeling suite. It can also be used for video editing, and it can be used to make video games, and it's got all these tons and tons of features. It's like a giant, massive project that's very far-reaching, but it's incredibly hard to use, and it's got a steep learning curve, to say the least. So my talk is going to try to ground Blender in a very small feature set so that we can all approach Blender and know what to Google for when we try to investigate it later on. So a little bit of info on Blender. It's a 3D modeling, animation, and media production suite. It can be used to make films, images, games, 3D printable objects, and much more. It's also free and open source under the GPL license. So yay, GPL! So I definitely encourage you all to go check it out. I was going through the Blender website earlier. You can get the source code. You can get builds for Windows, Mac, Linux, anything. Yeah, I encourage you to check it out. So first, you should probably know why you should trust me. I'm just the dude talking to you. So my name is Elijah, as I said. I work for the OSU Open Source Lab. I'm also the OSU Linux User Group president. OSU is Oregon State University. And I've been using Blender since about 2008. So that was like, you know, in high school when you get really into something? That was my thing. I was really into 3D stuff. So these don't necessarily make me credible. What does make me credible is that I've just been using it for a very long time. I'm not a professional. I don't get paid to work on Blender. I've tried making pull requests, but like I said, it's a huge thing of code. I just really love it, and I've been using it for a really long time, and I want to share that with you guys. So thank you all for coming, by the way. And if you have any questions, I might not have time for a Q&A, so just raise your hand, and we'll just do Q&A in the middle. So yeah. These are some things that I've made. This is like a little test project I did. Essentially what is going on here is I created some objects in 3D space. I gave them a skin. This is like a metallic skin. This is like a more rocky skin. Put them in a 3D environment, added some light, added a camera, and told Blender to simulate what it would look like. And this is the final product. And I also, this is a reproduction of a painting that I found that I really liked. It's just the same thing. I just created some objects, gave them a skin, put some light, and told Blender to simulate it, and it created this beautiful image. That's what rendering is. That's what Blender does. It renders, which is taking objects and 3D simulating them. So what will be covered today? Like I said, this is a much smaller scope. But first off, who has ever used a 3D program, like a 3D modeling program, like a CAD? Awesome. Wow, so many of you. Oh, geez. So who here has used Blender specifically, or tried to use Blender? Try, there you go. See, there were more hands. Exactly. Hopefully I will help the new hands that came up. So yeah, thank you all for coming, and thank you for investigating Blender, those of you who have tried using 3D software. Yeah, so things that will be covered today. If this seems boring to you, stick around. Maybe you'll be surprised. We're going to cover polygon modeling, materials, modifiers, and some basics of animation. So some of this will be kind of conceptual, and I'll show you, I'll explain the conceptual ideas of polygon modeling, materials, and animation, et cetera, and then I'll show you how to execute those in Blender. So much like with programming, there's a lot of overarching concepts that travel from language to language. Blender is the same way. There's a lot of 3D animation principles that travel from software tool to software tool, and Blender, I think everyone should use it, so I'm going to try to explain, for those of you who know 3D tools, how to do the things that you do in those other tools with Blender. And also, it should be accessible to beginners. If it's not, raise your hand and tell me to chill out. What won't be covered, though, Blender has a lot of features. We won't be covering very complex animation things. There's some high-level tools like rigging a character, giving them bones, We're not going to cover that. We're not going to cover the game engine or the Python scripting or textures or sculptures or the physics engine or compositing. Blender's got a lot going on. We only have an hour, so we're going to cover a very small scope and try to cover it very thoroughly. So yeah. Now we're going to do the demo. I'm going to go through some slides that will explain what the demo will cover, and then we'll do the demo. This is generally the final product. It'll be animated, don't worry. But it's very simple, but hopefully you'll learn a lot through the simple example. So let's get started. This is the Blender interface. When you open up Blender, it looks very similar to this. You have a 3D environment with a cube, a camera, a light, and this is a panel with general info. These are tabs. And essentially, what's going on here is a lot of stuff, a lot of buttons. I will try to teach you which buttons are important, because most of them are not important. So yeah. So let's cover the very, very basics. So this is an object. This is a cube, to be specific. Objects are like my phone. My phone is an object. It's just a thing. It's a unit. I can lift it up. I can move it around. Blender works the same way as the real world, where objects are just sort of units that we can compartmentalize. These are many objects. You don't just work with one at a time in Blender. So we have a monkey, a cube, a sphere. Are we good? Cool. Right, like I said, I'm starting from the ground, working my way up. So objects are, in Blender, there's a few types of objects. The one we're going to cover, though, is mesh objects. So mesh objects are made up of vertices, which are single points in space. Those single points don't get rendered because they take up no volume. But if you combine vertices, you get edges, and edges are when you connect two vertices together, you create a line. And once you get a bunch of lines together and you hook them up together, sounds like a party, you got a face. And a face will actually be rendered. Vertices and lines don't get rendered, or vertices and edges don't get rendered, but faces do, because they take up space, as far as Blender is concerned. And once you combine a bunch of faces, you can create complex geometry. This is a monkey. It's the default, Susan, yes, that is the name of the default monkey. Every 3D modeling suite has a complex object. Blender decided to make a monkey. Some other programs have like teapots, etc. So once you have an object, like a complex geometry monkey, by the way, geometry is just edges, lines, vertices, faces. That's just the general term for the bits. Once you have a complex piece of geometry, you can move it around in space. You can rotate it. You can stretch it. You can tell it to go different places. And that's what it looks like when you rotate the monkey, stretch it out, and move it a little bit. And we'll do this all in the demo, of course. And Blender also has a very cool feature called modifiers, which are basically rules put onto a set of geometry to influence its behavior. So this is a subdivision surface modifier. There's many, but the one that we're using right here is a subdivision surface modifier. So if you see the monkey initially, it's kind of got jagged lines. I'll show you in the demo a little more. It's got jagged lines, but the subdivision surface modifier, specifically, it's a very useful one. Everyone uses it. Takes every single face, splits it up into 4, and evens it out. So it's sort of like sanding it down. This is very useful for making the geometry easy to edit manually without having to take like massive performance hit on your computer and without making the model unwieldy. You want your geometry that you edit to be as stripped down as possible while still looking smooth and nice. And then there's the idea of animation. This is a very crude image. I may have done this at 1 in the morning last night. Essentially, we have a timeline at the bottom of our Blender interface. And then we have these things. They're lines, but they're meant to signify keyframes. With animation, the idea of a keyframe is you say, I want my object to be in this position at some time, and then at a later time, I want it to be in this position. And Blender will interpolate the difference between the two time steps, and will fill in the rest. So we only have 2 keyframes, but the object, the cube, will just move through space very smoothly. And this is very nice, a very nice feature of Blender. We will go into that more. And then rendering. I mentioned rendering a little bit before, but essentially rendering is you have an object or objects in space, you have light or lights in space, and you have a camera. And Blender says, okay, we have all these lights, shoot the light at the objects, and bounce the light off the objects into the camera. What does that look like? It's how the real world works. We have the sun or lamps, we have cameras, and we just sort of simulate that in this program. Blender has a really cool new render engine. New, it's like 4 years old, whatever. And it does very accurate light simulation. So if you're interested in that, the new render engine, it's very powerful. It makes things look beautiful. Check it out. There was a whole riffraff when it first came aboard. Everyone was like, oh my god, it's amazing. Anyway, that's a tangent. So I told myself I wouldn't do this. So once you render something, if you want to render something, you probably don't want it to be black and white. As fancy as that is and artistic, we want things to have some color. So we give them materials. So in this instance, we gave the cube a pink material. And when we render it, it will have a little bit more of a pink look, obviously, because we've given it like a pink skin. Essentially, material is taking an object and much like the modifiers apply a rule to the geometry, shader, or material applies a color or set of colors to an object. So this is pink, this is gray. Color tends to be nice when used well. And if Blender could only make black and white movies, that would be kind of lame, let's be honest. These slides are available on my website, slides.elijahcaine.me/SCaLE2015. I encourage you to write that down and check it out later. This is also some really good reading. These are just web slides, so you can go and look in your browser. Blender.org is the Blender website. The Blender wiki is very useful for referencing. cgcookie.com/Blender has some really great fundamental tutorials. And then Blender Artist is a great forum. And Blender Guru is more high-level tutorials. They give you a scene and they say, this is very complex, let's tackle it. And then also just my website at the bottom, you can see some more things I've done. Check out my blog. I do other things besides Blender, but you only hear for the Blender, so let's cover that. Yeah?
When you say you can animate the movement of an object, can you also animate the light, the camera, and whatever?
I'm glad you brought that up. This is actually a relatively new feature. I say relatively new. It's like 3 years old. Where everything in Blender can be animated. So even the color of an object can be animated. So say it's pink and you want it to become blue over time, or red or green or whatever. You can actually animate the color of an object or the material. So that's very good. And yeah, you can animate the position of lights or the position of the camera. Literally everything inside of Blender can be animated. So we will actually cover a little bit of that. Thank you for asking that question. That's really good. So that's the end of my slides. So let's cover the demo. I will just sort of sit behind here and do some things and try to narrate what I do. I encourage you to ask questions. So this is the Blender interface, give or take. When you open it up, it'll look very similar to this. We have a timeline at the bottom. I've adjusted it so the fonts are a little bigger. I've done some messing around to facilitate this. I have a little checklist here. Blender does not come with this checklist. I made that. We're going to tackle these 7 items. So hopefully at the end we will have a final rendered image, which will be animated with objects that have materials, lights, a camera, and a modeled table. And we're also going to import objects from another area. And we're also going to cover the interface, because the interface is very important and very intimidating. So let's get started. This is the 3D interface. I'm going to turn on screencast. Cool. So down here, it's gonna, like, if I do something a bunch, it'll tell you what I'm doing. So hopefully that will help you follow along. If that doesn't make sense, just ask me what I just did. I'll try to help. Blender is a very hotkey focused program. I will try not to use the hotkeys, but you will learn them if you tackle this program. So this is the 3D interface. We have a grid with an x-axis marked in red, a y-axis marked in green, and a z-axis, which is not marked, but that is blue when it appears. So the way you navigate is you hit your middle mouse button. You should have a 3-button mouse. For Blender, you don't have to. You can work around this, but it makes things very easy. So the way you navigate is you click your middle mouse and you rotate around. Can everyone see this? Is that appropriate? Okay. So the way you move around is that. The way you zoom in is with your middle mouse wheel, zoom in. And the way you move laterally, I guess, is pressing shift and middle mouse. This is one of those things where you will try to tackle it. It won't quite make sense. I've been using it for so long, it kind of becomes second nature. But getting comfortable in the 3D environment is very important and very useful. But don't feel like bad if you don't get it. No one gets it. So yeah, to keep going, I need to add an object to make things make a lot more sense. So we're going to add a mesh, monkey or torus? I need audience, guys. Come on, torus. Cool. Okay, torus was louder. Sorry, guys. Okay, so we have a torus here. So like I said, we have three axes. We have the x-axis marked in red, the y-axis marked in, huh? Right. So I have these little markers marked in, well, they're arrows. And basically, when you click an arrow, it will move the object on that axis. So it's locked to the y-axis right now. And if I click the red arrow, it's locked in the x-axis, and now it's locked in the z-axis. There's also a hotkey for this, G, which just moves it around, and then an X, Y, or Z for the axis. So x-axis, y-axis, or z-axis. Cool. So you can do more than just move it around. You can also, there's a little button down here for rotating. So I can rotate on the y-axis, the x-axis, or the z-axis. I can also resize the object. So I can resize it on the z-axis, the x-axis, and the y-axis. Things look a little funky when you do it like this. The hotkey for this, though, is S for scale. So you can scale it generally on the x-axis, on the y-axis, or the z-axis. And the hotkey for rotation is R. It's a little intuitive. And you can also rotate on just one axis. This is one of those things where you just got to use it, and you'll get used to it. So what else do we want to cover? So yeah, like I said, these buttons down here control which axis the object moves on. So this is movement, or how it moves. So this is movement, this is rotation, this is size. There's also different views for objects. So we can look at the wireframe, or sorry, bounding box, which is just sort of the extent that an object reaches, the maximum size that it is on any axis. There's also the wireframe mode, which just shows you the vertices and lines the edges that I was talking about earlier. And then there's the solid, which just shows you the faces, no materials or anything like that. And right now we don't have any materials, but there's also a texture and material mode, which would show you something more interesting than just white. We'll get into that later. And there's also the very cool feature that Blender has, which it can do real-time rendering. So this is not interesting, but it's real-time rendering right now. We will use this later when we go into animation. But it's actually simulating the light in real time and bouncing off the object into your view. So that's a very quick way to look at, yeah, what's up?
Quick question. Is it dark because there are no lights, or because
Yes.
of the material that's on it, or lack of the light there?
A little bit of both. There's only a global light right now, so everything's getting hit with the same amount of light. So that's sort of why it's bland and gray. When we start adding lights, it will be a little more vivid. Yeah. So that's the 3D view. This is the timeline. We'll get into that with animation. Essentially, that's how you scrub through the past and the future and the present. And this over here is the tab menu. It's sort of like the Blender developer said, this doesn't quite need its own section, so we're going to just give it this meta section. So these are tabs related to rendering. This is a tab related to sort of post-processing of rendering. Honestly, I don't use it very often. It's not incredibly useful for the things that I use. These are physics rules, so you can tell it what kind of units you want. By default, it's Blender units, but those can be centimeters or meters. And you can tell it what direction gravity goes. That's pretty cool. There's also world rules, so we can just make the world black, so there's no light. And then this is object rules, so we can name our torus like, what do you want to name it? Bread. Bread. I heard bread. I like that one. So there's also chains, which are a whole other subset. Like I said, we're not going to cover those. There's modifiers, which are very useful. We will cover those in a second. Don't worry. Chill out. And then there's vertex rules, mesh, which are again, a thing we're not going to cover, sorry. And there's materials, which we will cover in a second, physics things over here. Sorry, I know it's super unprofessional. So Blender comes with some really cool default views. There's the 3D view, which is just the 3D view, very stripped out. There's the animation view, which gives you panes for animation, motion tracking, compositing, game logic, etc. We're going to stick with the default view. Who here uses a tiling window manager? Cool. Blender kind of has that. So if you go down here, there's a little tab, and your cursor will become a plus. And if you drag up, it splits horizontally. If you drag left and right, it splits vertically. So for instance, vertical split, horizontal split. And you can change these with this little tab. It tells you there's 3D view or timeline. This could be a timeline. And you can see the cursor at the bottom affects the other one. And then there's other views you can go into, movie editor, game logic, a whole plethora of things that we don't have time to cover. But you can customize your 3D view with the tiling-esque window manager. And the way you get rid of this is you click on that tab and you drag it up to the thing you want to get rid of, and there's a little arrow that goes over it, and then it disappears. So drag it over, disappears. That's a very useful feature. It makes your workflow a lot faster if you know sort of generally what you're going for. It also comes with a Python editor, which I can't find. Never mind. So yeah. Okay, so Blender is written with like a C framework, and then everything else is Python. So you can actually write Python modules within Blender and run them in like a sort of IDE kind of environment. We don't have time to cover that. It's very cool. I encourage you to look into it. There are tutorials that are awesome. Yeah. What's up?
Can the object created from Blender, can it be printed by any 3D printer?
Yeah, so Blender has some really cool ways of exporting the object. You can just go to the export option. What? Oh, sorry. The question was, can you use Blender models and 3D print them on any printer? You can export 3D models from Blender into these formats, like .ply, .stl, .3ds, .obj. I think most 3D printers accept .obj or STL. And there's also add-ons that give you more formats you can output to. So yes, you can use Blender to make any 3D model for printing. Cool. So are there any more questions about the interface before we move on? No hands. Okay. So now we're going to make a table. So I'm going to kind of try to explain things as we go. Essentially, the approach we're going to take is we're going to create a cube, and we're going to like sculpt a table out of the cube. Does that make sense? Cool. So we're going to go to Add Cube, and we have a cube here. I press Z to toggle between wireframe and mesh mode, and I'm going to move it up a little bit, and then I'm going to resize it so it's a little thinner. This is like the table slab, essentially. Yeah, so these down here switch between size, rotation, and movement, and then that gives me these little nubbins right here. This is the movement, it's an arrow. This is the rotation, it's a circle, and this is the size, it's a little square. And this resizes it on the y-axis, and the x-axis, and Z, Y, X. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to make it a little longer because tables are kind of long. And then I'm going to press Tab to go into vertex edit mode. So now we get access to the vertices, right? So these are little single dots. And like I said, if you combine dots, they become edges. And if you combine edges, they become faces. So by selecting all four vertices, we select this face. Alternatively, we could go down here and select the vertex. This is the vertex select mode. This is the edge select mode. And this is the face select mode. And those buttons are only available in edit mode. What's up? Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better? Okay, great. Yeah, totally. So this is the vertex select mode. It gives us access to editing each individual vertice. Can you see what I'm selecting there? Is that okay? So I'm in object mode here, right? Sorry. So I'm in object mode here, and you can tell because I don't have access to the individual vertices, and it's not looking rendered. I press Tab to go into edit mode. Tab. Tab. Hmm?
You can also show them the menu.
There's a menu item.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, there's also this. Sorry, buttons. Got caught up with my hotkeys. There's also different modes. We're only going to cover object and edit mode. So edit mode gives us access to the individual vertices, edges, and faces. So here we have edges selected. So that's how we would select a face manually with vertices. Alternatively, we can go to edge select, which allows us to just select one edge, two edges, three edges, four edges of face, or just face select, which allows us to select the whole face. And the way that I'm grabbing multiple things is I'm pressing Shift and then right click. Right click is how you select objects, and then left click is how you select click buttons. Why? I don't know. It's all configurable. There's a configuration menu in the user preferences. Control-Alt-U opens the user preferences. So there's tons and tons of customizations for the interface, add-ons, themes. Yeah, tons and tons of customizations. I encourage you to look at it. Yeah, so we selected this face. I might blow your mind just now. Chill out. I'll try to explain it. If you have questions, please ask. So I'm going to press Control-R, and the way that edges work, they create edge loops. So this means if you have four edges together in a loop, you can select them because they sort of make a ring in the geometry. I've just pressed Control-R, and this allows me to make an additional edge loop within the given geometry. So Control-R, and then left-click adds this loop, and if I can move it however I want, up and down the piece of geometry. And this is very cool because it allows you to add complexity to your geometry and allows you to do more things with a model without creating other things and like sticking them together and duct taping them and stuff like that. It's a very elegant way to do things. It took me a while to learn this. But what we're going to do is we're going to create edge loops, and then we're going to do something called extruding a face. Actually, I'm just going to do extruding right now. So we're going to move that over with G, and then we're going to add a plane. Okay, so we just have a plane. It's very simple, plain and simple. It's just got edges, vertices, edges, and it's a face. Okay, so say we wanted to take this and make it into a rectangular cube-esque thing. We press E, and we extrude it out. I literally don't have words for this. I can just show you, and that's the only way I can explain this. So we select a face, and we extrude, face, extrude. Do you guys see what's going on here? Yeah? Okay, cool. So this is a very powerful tool, and now we've created a Tetris block. Woo! Yeah, okay. So the way that I'm going to delete this, you can press Delete or X. So there, that's cool. And now we're going to move this back to our center-ish area. So now, like I said, we're going to add some more edge loops, and this will all make sense in a second. Adding edge loops, adding edge loops. I would narrate more, but this is the best way I can explain it. Yes, you have a question. Go for it. Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the question was, how do I do an edge, add an edge loop lengthwise or widthwise? Sorry, I'm bad with words. Essentially, Blender just kind of figures that out based on context. So if I am selecting, if I'm adding an edge loop on something, how do I say this? Something like lengthy, it'll add a lengthwise edge loop. If I do something long-y, what was the other word? Width. If I do something on the like a more width axis, it'll just add it to the width. And there's a better way to put it is Control-R. It'll figure it out based on context. I can either do it here or here, and it adds a purple outline of where it's going to go. Based on where the cursor is, yes. And if you want to add more at the same, like all at the same time, like you want to add 12, you can either type 12. Don't do that. Or you can use your middle mouse wheel and scroll up or down, or up or down. So like if I wanted to do that, I could just add a bunch. That's too many. Control Z to undo. So that's cool. And now these look a little like, these are going to be extruded to be the legs of the table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these with Control Alt right click. That's how you select an edge loop, okay? So Control Alt right click will just select the whole edge loop. And now I'm going to go into this mode, move it over. That looks roughly squarish. Blender is an art program. Some people want to use it for 3D printing. I've done it a few times. I think CAD programs are a little better for precision. If you want to make something sort of loose and artistic, definitely use Blender. But if you need like a cog or something that's going to mesh with something else, use CAD. People have tried to put CAD features into Blender. You can check them out. But Blender is an art program, so keep that in mind as you go forward. Can I snap to the grid? Who said that? Yes, you can. I don't remember. Yes, you're right. You can snap to the grid. I don't remember how to do it off the top of my head, but yeah, it's possible. We have the technology. So I'm going to zoom into the underside of this and select these 4 faces, and I'm going to extrude them out to be legs. Get ready. Extrude. And now we have sort of a table, yeah. You can applaud me, I'll take it, yeah. So our table's a little thin. What we're going to do is we are going to go into wireframe mode, and we're going to select half the table with box select, which is B. And we're just going to select all these. Actually, we're going to press A to unselect a lot of things. A toggles between selecting everything and unselecting things. So A, I'm just pressing A a bunch. If we have like one thing selected and we press A, it'll unselect it, and then it'll reselect everything. So if I press B and select everything, and then move it, whoop, edge select, sorry. There we go. And move it over. Now we can just make our object arbitrarily big. It also has like endless cursor, so that's cool. You can turn that off. You can configure it. It's all good. So yeah, now we have a table. Well, how am I on time, by the way? Oh, cool. We're good. So now we have a table. We have a beautiful table. Huh? Question. Hi. Yeah, there is there totally is. So, who here uses like Vim? Vim? Okay. So you know how Vim does that thing where like there's a weird command, but like that command is pretty consistent, so you can just use that command arbitrarily everywhere. Blender's the same way. So if you want to like move an object, grab an object and move it on the x-axis 3 Blender units, you say G, X, and then literally the number 3, and it'll move it over 3 Blender units. If you have, I just escaped. If you have this selected, this area selected, and you want to move it on the x-axis, let's say 2.5 units, you say G, X, 2.5. And it moves over 2.5 units, or negative 2.5 if you want to move it the other way. So that's very cool. You can do some good precision with that. As artsy as it is, it's sometimes really good to have precision. So that was a really good question. Thank you. For this, I'm trying to use all the buttons, not trying to use my keyboard. I get a little caught up in the thing. Sorry, that was the least elegant thing I said all day. So now we have a table. So number 2, done. Go team. Bless you. So now I'm going to add a camera. And we're going to add camera. So we've created a camera. It's got a really cool look. It doesn't really look like a camera, but whatever. We're going to put it generally, it points in that direction. Like the square is where it's pointing. So that's generally right. Oops, sorry. Generally right, but the triangle is the top of the camera. Yeah, good question. And if you have multiple cameras, the triangle will be empty if it's not the active camera. You can also animate that. You can have 5 cameras and animate which one is rendering at any given moment. Don't ask me how. I forgot how to do that. It's some 5-key combo thing. So if you want to go into the camera, which is very useful, you press 0 on your number pad. You need a full keyboard to do a lot of things in Blender. The number pad is used excessively. It's a little bit of a strain. I don't like bringing this to conferences, but I have to. You can emulate it, but just keep that in mind. You need some tools to do Blender most eloquently. So if we're in the camera mode, we can press Shift F and go into fly mode and sort of position our camera like we want to see it. And you can also do this cool like Minecraft thing where you press WASD to move around. So WSAD. So we can position our camera. Position our camera where we want it to be, and then we click left click to say this is where the camera is. So now we have our camera roughly positioned where we want it to go. So that's good. We have a camera. But if we try to render with F12, that's not useful. Yeah, so I set it to black. So now we're going to add a light. So the way we add a light is we say add lamp, and we're going to use a Hemi lamp. I encourage you to experiment with the different lamps, but Hemi is just the useful one now. There's no questions, right? Are we good? Cool. Question? Add lamp. No? You don't have that? You might be in edit mode. Cool. So lamp. So we're going to move our lamp up above the table, and you can sort of see it's pointing, and the lamp is pointing downward because of the hemisphere thing, and the dotted line points to where the lamp is pointing. So now if we press F12, F12 is the render button. It renders, not very useful, I got that. We will add lights and move them around in a bit, but I just wanted to make sure it's not black anymore, so that's cool. So we're going to move this lamp over, and we're going to rotate it on the x-axis. So now we can see it's sort of pointing at the table. And if we press Shift-D, Shift-D duplicates objects, all objects. So lamps, mesh objects, cameras, exactly. So Shift-D, and we can just move it over, and then we can rotate it on that axis. So now we're going to rotate it. And now if we press F12, which is the render button, alternatively we can just press the render button. Sorry guys. We have a little bit more of a good table. One thing that will help though, because it's physically rendering light bounces off of objects onto other objects, we're going to add a floor. So we press add mesh plane, and we see that plane down there. We're just going to press S and increase the size of it on all axes. And if we press render again, we have not too shabby, yeah. So that's cool. We're making progress. So we have these two lamps. Now, oh man, I'm so glad you asked that. I'm so glad you asked that. So we've added the lights, we've added the cameras. The next step happens to be materials, which cover exactly that. Thank you. So we're going to go to the material tab, which is a little sphere with a light thing. It's a cool little tab. We're going to say new. So we're going to click the table, and we're going to say new material, which means the selected object is given a new material, and we're going to name the material like wooden dash table. You should name your things. Unfortunately, Blender has like 5 things associated with every object, so naming is kind of a hassle, but it helps for collaborative projects. So there's a few options. There's so this is the material menu. It's not too overwhelming, but I'm going to try to step through it very, very slowly. So this is a given color for an object. You can also give it an image. We're just going to do colors. You can also give it varying values, and there's some other options. We're not going to touch those. But there are surface, I don't know how to say it, surface rules, I guess. So the diffuse rule is kind of like paper, very plain. But there can also be glass. And actually, let's turn on real-time rendering. So we can do glass, which gives it like a glassy look. Glossy, which gives it like a mirror look. Unfortunately, it's black up there, so it just looks black. But you know, we can also do diffuse again, which is just plain old plain. Actually, let's give it a little bit of a color now. What color? Purple. Okay, I heard purple first. So now it's sort of like, that's not purple. Yeah, there we go, purple. So now it's purple. So we can have purple glass. You can see through it. Purple glossy, which gives it like a purple metallic look. And you can even change the roughness, which is kind of cool. Makes it look like stainless steel. And emission, whoa, that's not emission. That's the opposite of emission. emission, which makes it a light, which is very cool. The way that I usually light things in my scenes is not with lamps, but with planes that are given the emission property. This is cool because it simulates more accurately a light in real life. Why? I have no idea. It just works better. Sorry. I'm an artist, dude. I just do it. There you go. Yeah, that's what it is. That guy. He said it's because it has volume and not just point source, which I agree. Light bulbs are more volume and less of a point. Any other questions? Yes, sorry. Yeah, so like an image of wood? Yeah, totally. I can't do it right now. I don't have that set up, but you can get an image of wood and paste that onto the object and give it a skin. That leads into a whole nother talk about how to properly add materials. You have to UV unwrap. Google that if you want. It's actually really cool. But yeah, you totally can. Blender allows you to do everything that every other 3D modeling suite allows you, that's a good example. You can even add bump maps, which is like a black and white grayscale map, which adds bumpiness to a texture to an object. That is something we're not covering. Google it though. Google's your friend, or DuckDuckGo, or Yahoo, or whatever, Bing, whatever. No problems. Okay, so we're gonna just stick with diffuse though, and we're gonna let's do this. Floor. That's not useful. Floor. You said mirror, right? Glossy. Oh yeah, that's cool. Okay. You want to keep it? Okay, we'll keep it. So I'm just going to switch back into solid mode so my laptop doesn't have a heart attack. Rendering is very power intensive. If you have a small battery, wait until you get home to render. So we've done the materials. Now we're going to animate our object in 20 minutes. Not hard, I swear. You could do it. So we have our timeline down here, and the way animation works, like I said, is it's a collection of keyframes. So we say, I want this object to be in this state right now, and at this point in time, I want it to be in this other state. So by state, I mean the location of the object is taken into account, the rotation is taken into account, and the size is taken into account. So the way you add a keyframe, there's probably a button for it. I never found it, so I just press I, and it brings up this really cool menu. So I can say, Blender, keep track of the location, rotation, or scale, or any combination of this object. So we're going to do, why not, location, rotation, and scale. So there's a little yellow line right here that keeps track of our keyframes. So at keyframe 0, we say, table, be your thing. Just don't do anything. And we're gonna make our animation just 50 frames long. So at the bottom we have start and end. Can I raise that up? Yeah, kinda. So at the bottom we have start and end. We're gonna end it at 50 frames, and we're gonna just grab this little thingy and make it smaller, so we have like more precision. Essentially, this is like how big our timeline is. We're making our timeline smaller because we're making a smaller animation. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, sure. Okay. Is that good? Better? Cool. So at frame 0, we say, table, be your thing. At frame 10, though, we're going to flip the table, by the way. Frame 10, though, we're going to raise the table up, and we're going to rotate it. And we're going to say location, rotation, scale. And then at frame 20, we're going to rotate it again. And we're going to lower it. Actually, no, I lied. We're going to do, so here's what it looks like so far. Okay. We say table do your thing, and then table be flipped upside down. And then we're going to, at frame 20, say, okay, table, land, insert, location, oh, that one. And then at frame 30, we're going to just tell it to bounce back up. And then we're going to rotate it again. I know this is invigorating. So now if we watch the animation, you can see it's raised up, bounces, and then lands. So we can press play, because, you know, pressing play is cool. And it does the thing. And if we see what... Yes, it would. There's a whole, yeah. So there's a whole, there's a little tab right here. Oops, sorry. There's a little plus tab right here. You can't quite see it, but your cursor will become two arrows going in two directions. If you click that, you get access to this menu, which keeps track of the location, rotation, and scale. So if you wanted to set it to 0 on any axis or 0 on any rotation, you would manually say 0 in this. There's a hotkey for that, don't worry. So you can actually watch the numbers change as the animation goes on. So that's cool. So there we go. And since we're doing animation, we might as well animate the material like was brought up earlier. Blender has this really cool feature where everything can be animated, including the color. So we put our cursor over this and we press I, and it gets highlighted in yellow. And then we can say at any point in the future, it's highlighted in green when there's no keyframe on that. It's sort of interpolating what the color should be. We're going to say turn like greenish blue. And then we press I again. So if you watch that color, it changes throughout the animation. Can everyone see that? Sort of light. So when we animate, we will see, actually let's just do that. You can see the color changing. Everyone getting this? Cool. Oh, press. You're going to be very disappointed, sorry. Yeah. We can actually tell Blender to go at different time steps. So it's currently 24 frames per second, but we can customize that and say, like, 5. So we click all the way back, and we can say, slow down, dude. Can I what? What do you mean add a light source? The light source you had earlier? Oh, yeah. Let's try that. The initial, like, mediocre light source. So add lamp, Hemi, over here. And the reason the object spawned over here is because that's where my cursor is. The cursor is where objects spawn. It also serves other purposes, but that's its most prevalent purpose for No, it doesn't. So you have to manually tell Blender, you have to explicitly say, Blender, keep track of this right here, right? So if you don't give Blender any animation data for an object, it's static. It's there the entire time. So if you wanted, I could make it go away and then appear in frame 17. But yeah, let's add that object. And we'll do some real-time rendering. So this is what we have so far. We generally have a moving thing. We can do a full render, and it makes it look a little prettier. These are statistics. We can get rid of those in the. This is the render tab. I have a stamp, which has like, woo, scale 13. We can get rid of that though, and have a pretty picture. Cool. So that's cool. We animated it. We don't really have time to render, like full render. Rendering takes a very long time. I have a giant gaming computer that I don't do games on enough. I really just render with it. Yeah, so I should just, can I steal that? Is that, you didn't hear that from me, sorry. Yeah, what's up? Yeah, so that gets into, so I created the animation linearly, but I could arbitrarily say, over here, I actually want to add a keyframe at frame, let's say 25, where the object gets rotated, this, or actually it gets bigger, right? Let's not do that. Actually, yeah, let's do that. So it gets bigger, right? So it gets huge. And now if we keep track of the object, it'll be pretty normal. And then at frame 20, it'll start to get big, and then it'll get small. So you can create animations non-linearly, which is a really cool feature of Blender. There's also something called the line editor, the animation line editor, which is a menu I can just show to you. Don't get intimidated, please. Graph editor. which keeps track of X, Y, and Z axes for size, rotation, and scale. And you can edit each of these individually, and it affects the movement of the object. Trust me on that. I don't have a demo for that, sorry. Control Z to undo. So we're going to bring this back to the 3D view. How much time do I have? 10 minutes? Cool. Okay, cool. We got time. You think? Or do we have 0 minutes? 10 minutes? Cool. We have 10 minutes. Fantastic. So I'm going to do some more things. I said I would talk about importing an object. So I've actually already created an object, a chair, because, it's a table. Why not? We're going to go down here to append. There's a link and append. Link basically says, I want to use an object in a different Blender file, and any changes to the original object in the original file, I want those changes to have an effect in the new file. So if I had a chair from another file, imported it into my new scene, but made changes to the original chair, that would update my chair in the new scene. Does that make sense? It's very useful for... If you imported the skin and the chair, yes. Yeah. So we're just gonna append, because this is a demo. This is not a long-term project. And we're gonna say chair, and we're gonna go down to the object of the chair, and I didn't name it, sorry. It's a cube, trust me. And now we've added the chair. So, in the floor, don't worry about it. And now we're gonna make it smaller, because that's way too big for a chair. So now we've added a chair, and hopefully it won't get hit by the... Oh, yeah, I got hit. Cool. Whoa. Forgot about that, sorry. Let's just... Yes. That involves using the Blender physics / game engine, depending on which one you want to use. You can actually achieve physics with the game engine or the physics engine. Depends on how much precision you want. The game engine is much more lax, but much easier to use. The physics engine allows you to have a lot more control, but takes forever to calculate or bake. Yes, there are particles. Actually, so these are layers. Layers are really cool, so let's say we have a layer for just the lights. We can click over here, and nothing is available. So we have our scene here with our things, but let's say we wanted to move the lights and the cameras to a different layer. We select all the objects we want to move, and we press M for move, and we say move it to the second layer. And now there's a little dot down here that signifies there are things on this layer. And it just sort of helps you separate concerns. So I'm going to go to a different layer and add a monkey. So add a mesh monkey. Blender has this really cool feature that they don't talk about enough, which is the quick menu. So we're going to add fur to this monkey in a second. Object. Select. I swear I did this before. This is what happens when you don't plan your... Yeah. Quick fur, there we go. So now we have fur on our monkey. And now we're going to render it really quickly. So it doesn't look like fur. It will look like fur when we render, don't worry. So now we have our monkey, and now we're going to go to our camera view. And we're also going to select our plane and move it to our camera view. So we have our camera layer, and we have our monkey, because we're shift and selecting different layers. So now if we go into our view, we see our monkey, and we press F12 to render, and do it. Figure it out. Yeah, that kind of looks like fur. Anyway, sorry, a little anticlimactic. Didn't plan that one out.
Can you self-select portions of the scene to render, so you're not rendering the entire scene over and over again if you only want to render one particular portion?
Yeah, so there's an option somewhere hidden in the depths of the menu selection that you basically say, I want to create this box. Oh, did it crash? So yeah, Blender does this thing where it crashes sometimes. That just happened. Yeah, so that just happened. You should still use it. Just get really good at saving. It's very easy to save. Oh no, we're good. We're good. Never mind. Did I say crash? It doesn't crash. Yeah, we're good. Don't worry about it. So yeah, just save regularly. It's a really hard question for me to answer. I think you should, but you should know that Blender uses binary files. It doesn't use like nice flat files like code that you write. So there is like a Blender plugin that allows you to just say git commit, git push, stuff like that. But that's no different than just using a command line interface. And Git won't like you, or whatever version control you use.
Can you set up pre and post save hooks so that, for example, you do snapshotting of your saves?
Anything you can do with Git, you can do with Blender version control.
All of those UIs running, but you save now, it creates another version of snapshots that maybe 5 minutes without exiting. It creates another version. And there's another way that you can shell out, do a git commit, for example, and a snapshot copy.
You know, I haven't looked into that enough. Sorry, your question was basically, can you set up like, extending the version control question. Can you set up like pre and post commit hooks?
Just pre and post save hooks.
Save hooks.
Commit hooks, just, even just copy to the next directory.
I think that's possible. Yeah, I think that's possible. I haven't answered it. I haven't been able to look for that.
What's the nature of the undo? Is it unlimited?
Is it unlimited?
How far back can you undo your work?
Pretty much unlimited. Do you know the?
That's the setting part, but it goes back quite a ways.
It's sort of like anything, like a bash history. There's a setting to make it go really, really far back, but the default is very far. I've never hit a time when I was like undoing and it stopped undoing. Question, yeah.
Can you do incremental rendering so that I can save my work and then start rendering again when I'm back at work?
Yeah. So the way that most people do rendering for their projects is this is our render tab. We go down to output, and you can tell it where to render, and you can tell it what file format to render. So if you select an image format, it will render each frame individually as an image, and this is probably what you want to do. So say you have 10,000 frames you want to render, but you only have time to do 5,000 now and 5,000 later. You render 5,000 images, and then the other 5,000 later, and you compile them in the post-processor, or the video editor, and you can say, select these 10,000 images and make them into a video. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to do /temp, but we could even do that. Oh, sorry. We could even do that right now. This one. Accept. So I'm going to name my images SCaLE. Right? SCaLE.png, accept. And we're telling it to just do PNG rendering, and we're going to press render animation, and now it will start to render each individual frame of my animation as it moves along. So this is saving into /foo/SCaLE 2015, and I'm actually going to stop the render. It should have done like 4 or 5 images. Let's go to the there's a background render. I mean, you can just minimize it. Sorry. There are external renderers that do that. There are some really interesting renderers that are just the render engine, and you basically say, take this Blender file and just render it. That requires using a different set of modeling and texturing tools. I think Tux Render is one of them. You should definitely look into them. They have like Blender plugins that make it really easy. As far as the default Blender engine, I've never really needed to do that. There are render farms though for Blender that I think will decouple the UI from the render engine. Question, there were some hands that I didn't address.
Can you render across multiple hosts?
Yeah, there are really cool Blender render farm programs out there that will allow you to do render farming. Yeah, so this is the time when I talk about Docker, because we all have to talk about Docker. What's up?
Well, I just want to point out that actually Blender does have an ability to use multiple machines that have Blender installed on it as kind of a render farm.
Oh, cool. Nice, yeah. And there's also some cool crowdsourcing render farm projects out there. You should definitely check out. There were some hands over here, right? Okay, cool. Anything else? Are there any things that are like burning? You're like, I want to know what this is. No? How do you save? Yeah, good question. 1 second. Sorry. So File, Save As, or save, or just Control S. So Save As will bring up a file browser. I can say, I want to save this as supersecretfile.blend, or like demo2.blend. Save as Blender file, and now it'll just be a .blend file. Does that answer your question? Or, okay, cool.
Can you apply gravity and like throw the table across the room and see
Yes, you can. That is a yeah. There's a whole physics engine built in. They use bullet physics for the game engine and some other physics things. You can do some really cool simulations in Blender. There are awesome tutorials that are like 3 hours long that cover that. There's a lot of settings. Most of them don't matter. But yeah. What's up? Any more?
Can you do fluid animation?
Yep, you can do.
Or water down hill or something?
Yeah.
Wow.
Takes forever, but yes. Any last questions? Okay, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Yeah, cool. And if you have any questions, come on up and ask me.